following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for going good crazy. This weekend, I was up in the Blue Mountains at the Our Homes Magazine South Georgian Bay Holiday Market with Lip Lady Canada. If you're at the 400 Market in Innisfil to see Santa this end of November and December, stop by and say hi to my friends at Lip Lady Canada. They're great. If you followed the content I posted on @NotTherapy Show on Instagram or the It's Not Therapy Facebook group, you can see pictures of us cosplaying as Elsa and Anna from Frozen. I'm doing a lot of events this fall and winter. Some of them involve cosplay. I wore a fez because fezzes are cool, and with that comes a bit of fear. So we're going to talk about making friends with fear this week because it's a life skill. My guest this week is an absolutely wonderful lady I met at the National Women's Show a few weeks back. Hypnotist Sainoor Premji will be joining me later to talk about how she helps her clients make friends with fear. Before we get into that topic itself, I want to assure you that hypnosis does have some confirmed benefits. I checked this like 4 times just to be sure, because I get a lot of solicits from new age stuff that doesn't check out, but hypnosis does, especially regarding stress and anxiety. Okay, but here's the thing. I don't like the way a lot of people engage with anxiety the same way I have issues with the way a lot of people use the term depression. And it's not because I don't think these things are real. They're absolutely real. It's just the term depression and anxiety. They're just too vague. And too vague risk getting into that area of using mental health language to avoid doing the mental health work. Being too vague means you're not actually centering the problem. You're not calling the problem what it is. You're dodging it and strengthening the stories you tell yourself that keeps you stuck. Anxiety includes at least 30 different symptoms. Depression, and this is being very, very conservative, includes at least 20 known symptoms. If you don't understand exactly what's going on with you, if you can't name it, how can you expect to feel better? Top 10 phrase, ignoring negatives isn't being positive. Avoidance is a symptom, not a viable process to being your best self. If you're stopping everything the minute you feel depression or anxiety, you're giving your brain reasons to make you more anxious or depressed because your brain's primary motivator is keeping you safe and miserable as opposed to thriving and happy. The first thing I do when I'm feeling anxious is to ask myself, so what? Okay, I'm feeling this thing, this unpleasant thing. So what? Does it mean I should change what I'm doing? Or does it mean I should acknowledge the feeling and do it anyway? Now, this whole process only works if both options are valid. Walking away is valid. Stopping is valid. But going forward despite the anxiety is also valid. Now, I should back up and define the difference between anxiety and fear for me. This is not true of anybody else, just me. To me, anxiety is, okay, this is stressing me out, but it might be worth doing anyway. The fear makes it worth it. Hardcore fear, right? Not a little bit of fear, a lot of fear, on the other hand, is something I had to learn to listen to. When I was young, I was afraid all the time. This is not an exaggeration. I'd get maybe 5 seconds after waking up every morning before the fear would crash in on me. Many nights I can still remember staring at the tree outside the window of my room as something to focus on to block out the fear enough to sleep. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. I was afraid so often that I stopped being aware I was feeling fear. And that led to a lot of self-destructive decisions. Learning to acknowledge and feel the fear again was terrible. It was terrifying because it's fear, and I didn't know how to feel it. It felt weak because I had a messed up idea of what weakness is. Feeling fear isn't weak. I had to redefine my entire relationship to weakness and strength and realize that weakness isn't being afraid. Weakness is sacrificing your ethics so you don't have to acknowledge the terror of a given situation. Avoiding feeling fear is a form of lying to yourself. And when you lie to yourself, you don't tend to get good results. Example, I was too afraid to set boundaries. I wasn't feeling the fear, but I still wasn't setting boundaries. I was too afraid to cut people off because then I'd have enemies and they could hurt me. So I didn't have any actual friends. I was too afraid to stand up for what I believed in because I came out of childhood taught that any criticism meant that I was doing something wrong and had to stop immediately. It's impossible to avoid criticism, and even though criticism hurts, it's not worth being terrified of. The most useless fear in the world for me, I'm not speaking for anyone else, just me, but the most useless fear in the world is the fear of being embarrassed. But that's the primary driver in most people's lives. Avoiding embarrassment. Now, okay, you're talking about someone, that someone being me, who is at a Christmas market doing interpretive dance in a lipstick booth this weekend, wearing a fez and a poofy dress. These details are important, but anyway, it was fun, not embarrassing. If the people around you are so merciless that the taunts they fling at you are unbearable, they're not your people, and having them in your life isn't a net benefit. People who actually support you will tell you straight out what the issues are instead of resorting to hurtful mockery. And if people do mock you, guess what? That's on them, not you. Oh God, heaven forbid you try to do something that isn't a guaranteed success. Here's the truth. There's no such thing as a guaranteed success for anything worthwhile. But if you don't try, if you don't take calculated risks, well, that's a guarantee of failure. These are the kind of thoughts that hypnosis helps you realign. So without further ado, but one commercial break, I want to introduce you to Sainoor Premji, Hypnosis with 2B Hypnosis, 2bhypnosis.com. And we're going to talk about making friends with fear. How did you overcome fear? Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Not Therapy Show is the website. Nottherapyshow.com is the website. I always leave off the .com. Anyway, at Not Therapy Show on social media. Making friends with fear after the break on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking about fear. What is it and what to do about it? And as I said off the top, I'm here with the guest this week, Sainoor Premji of 2B Hypnosis, a hypnotist who I met at the Women's Show a few weeks ago, is on the program. Sainoor, thanks for coming on It's Not Therapy.
Thank you for inviting me, Liana. I'm so excited to be here. I was so happy to meet another like-minded person.
Yeah, we got talking at the Women's Show. I was like, okay, we got to do something because hypnosis is one of those things that I think a lot of people don't understand what it does and what it doesn't do. So before we get into the topic of fear, because I mean, hypnosis is a very viable form of treatment for a lot of people. What's your sort of elevator pitch about what hypnosis does and doesn't do?
Hypnosis will help you deal with any everyday issues like insomnia. We talked about fears, about smoking, addictions, anything that is an everyday thing. So it will help by changing your subconscious into believing something that's better for you. And it does not, it's not a cure-all or a fix-all for deep psychosis, or if you're on a medication for depression or any mind-altering medication, then hypnosis is very hard to work with. I remember when I first started my practice, I had a girl that came for, I can't even remember what it was for, but I do remember that she kept saying, I'm hitting a wall and I can't go any further. After the session, we discovered that she was on some sort of depression medication, and it forms this barrier that we can't go past.
That's really interesting that medications impact the effectiveness of hypnosis. So with fear, I mean, that was the first thing I heard about hypnosis being effective, things like phobias, fear of flying, things like that. Now, nowadays we talk a lot about anxiety. We don't talk a lot about fear, and they're not the same thing. So in your practice, when people come in with a fear or phobia related issue, what is the first thing you do with them?
Well, do you mind if I just talk a little bit about fear first,
Yep.
and
Yep.
we'll circle back?
Go for it. Yeah.
Well, we've all heard the expression that there's an elephant in the room, and a lot of us may be aware that something is there or that something is off and that it should be addressed. However, most of us pretend it's not there.
Yeah.
For me, fear is almost like that elephant in the room. An elephant we have pretended is invisible. We can sense it and we often become aware of it. However, we rarely acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you think of fear as a friend who shows up uninvited
Yeah.
and says, hey, I brought anxiety dip and stress appetizers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a lot of anxiety that you were talking about, or whatever, comes from some root of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and fear is not all bad. Fear is primal, it's ancient. It's a kind, and it's the kind of the, and I would say I have to rephrase this, and that is the reason we are still here.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't have fear, we would have jumped off the cliff. We would have petted wild bears.
Right, exactly. It's feedback. It's legitimate emotion, and a lot of people walk around not actually feeling their fear because they're taught, in their formative years that it's bad or you're doing something wrong or it's weakness. And so people end up walking around with, like you said, that elephant in that room or that uninvited friend all the time to the point that it's just background noise, right? They're not aware they're experiencing it.
Exactly. That's such a lovely way of putting it. Or they are not aware that they have to acknowledge it. Not so much that they don't know it's there. They've just taught to ignore it.
Yeah.
And whatever we ignore, we both know the mind just puts a block around it.
Yeah, but it just gets stronger and stronger because, like you said, fear is the reason we're still here. It's that whole, okay, back in the day, if something rustles in the bush and you run away, well, you might be embarrassed. If there's a predator in there and you didn't run, well, you don't live to be embarrassed. That's the
I was
purpose
just
of it.
going to say, wouldn't you rather be embarrassed
That's
than be
right.
eaten or half eaten or
Yeah.
attacked?
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is our survival instinct. But
I agree.
yeah, and I think a lot of people, well, tell me if you agree or not. A lot of people have trouble nowadays distinguishing fear you should listen to and fear that has just kind of become a habit.
Exactly. And that is a lovely point as well. I don't know if people realize that humans are wired with only two basic fears from birth. So when we are born, we are only born with two fears. One is fear of falling and fear of loud noises. And isn't it interesting that everything else is
Is
cultivated
learned.
life, is learned?
Right.
So congrats, we've learned how to be terrified of public speaking and have to be terrified of a tiny spider that is as big as our toe in the bathroom.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
or clowns or dogs or a lot of things that sometimes, I mean, fear of flying, it's not that it's no risk, but sometimes the brain, the what if part of the brain goes, off on walkabout all on its own, and we overestimate the risk. At post COVID-19, a lot of researchers have said that people have gotten unable to effectively assess risk.
I agree. And thank you for bringing that up. When COVID hit, it seems like fear blossomed. And this is why I turned my attention to working with fear first. It wasn't something I did, but when COVID hit, all of a sudden people were terrified.
Yeah.
And that fear scared me. I wasn't afraid of what, but it scared me how people had become insular,
Mhm.
right? And did you know that statistically over 70% of people fear public speaking more than death?
Really? I did not know that.
And that they would rather be in the coffin than the one giving the giving the
Eulogy, right. Oh,
you.
wow. Okay. Now, what is it? Is it that fear of embarrassment again with the public speaking?
Isn't that interesting? I'm not quite sure. The ones that I have done worked with my clients, they have acquired the fear during high school or public school where they were made fun of when they were giving a presentation. So it's like falling off the horse rather than saying, okay, they made fun of me, so what?
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And that the so what is what I find a lot of people, well, of all ages, but I find it's especially acute in younger adults right now.
Yes,
The so what is catastrophic. It's I'm going to fail the presentation, and so I'm going to fail the course, and so I'm going to fail out of school, and so
right.
I'm not going to get a good job, and then my life is, and it just so many young people do the exact same chain of catastrophizing. It's gotta be getting taught in the schools. There's
It
just too many
has to be.
people, yeah,
Yeah.
from too many different backgrounds reporting the exact same chain of thinking.
I agree. And I think rather than supporting someone, and I don't know if you know, but I'm also a Montessori teacher and I've worked with 6 to 15-year-olds.
Okay.
And I've worked in overseas. I worked in Tokyo, in Beijing, in Canada. And one of the things that was part of my class was public speaking, how to stand, how to present, how to speak, how to do that. And I found it very interesting that it's no longer part of a lot of public school teaching. And yet, most of our life now depends on this, on being able to present and being able to talk, in being able to share. And
Yeah,
we all have moments like when I couldn't pronounce the word, instead of going into a panic, you helped me out. Thank you for that.
that's right.
And
Well,
that
I've been there,
happens.
right?
It happens because our mind works faster than our words.
Yeah.
So it's already thinking here, and so the words have to catch up.
Yeah. And at this time of year, I find the words kind of leave me sometimes. And
Yeah.
I do think that is part of fear. I was going to go to a commercial, but I'm going to do this instead because this is really interesting and I don't want to lose it. Um, I talk on this show about, one of my top 10 phrases, self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. And
Thank you.
that is directly connected to fear, I think, because I mean, I make a fool of myself for a living. Right. I mean, at the women's show, I dressed really shiny so people would come up and talk to me. And leaving the house, I look in the mirror and I say, oh my God, I am an aging woman just trying too hard. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway.
I
And
love it, love it.
like, that's not how people saw me. People are like, you're shiny. And it's like, yes, that's the point. And that, that's the self-talk. Right. That's me going, you don't have to be perfect. I say perfect is a lie, not trying to be perfect. If you are a bit silly, if people make rotten comments about you, that's on them, not me. But that's a story I chose to tell myself.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing is when people make a comment, it is their state of mind.
That's right.
As long as you feel good. I love shiny things. When I go to shows, I always have something shiny on. And perhaps that's why I was attracted to you as well,
Maybe.
because you
Yeah.
had the same sense of fun.
Yeah.
Life is so short.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't wear a bit of bling at a women's show, then where can you wear it?
I
Right.
would say wear it everywhere, but don't take my advice.
Well, to me as well, it was almost like reflecting the overwhelm from the 35,000 people
I
that were there.
agree.
And I went into the bathroom at one point and there was a woman crying just from overwhelm.
Wow.
And I mean, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, because I did the dumb thing. It's like, are you okay? Of course she's not okay, but it was just opening the conversation, right? And she, had a baby at home, and this was her attempt to get out, and she was just overwhelmed. And so I started telling jokes, right?
Exactly. And the
Yeah,
thing is, if you don't ask them, how you okay, you don't know if you're invited into the
that's right.
conversation.
That's right. Right.
So I think you acknowledge them, you see them, that
Yeah,
I acknowledged you, I understand you're not doing well or you're unhappy, something has thrown you off. Is there anything I can do?
right.
And so I think it's a lovely opener. Are you okay? Or it's a nice way of saying, how can I support you at this moment?
Right, which is more accurate, but sometimes it's just allowing the person the space to say, no, no, I'm not okay, can be really validating, right? Because I think a lot
Exactly.
of a lot of people don't feel like they can answer honestly, and so they end up kind of trapped in this box of their own making. And that's what I want to get to after the break. Shaynor, hang on. We're gonna come back. Sainoor Premji, 2B hypnosis. She's a hypnotist. We're talking about fear. After the break, we're gonna talk about little things that you can do. If you want to see Sainoor, we'll give you your contact information at the end, but little things you can do to feel the fear and do it anyway. So Sainoor, you get to hang on?
I am. Thank you.
All right, questions, comments, concerns, nottherapyshow.com is the website. Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email, at nottherapyshow on socials. We'll be back after this talking about fear and moving past it on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking to Sainoor Premji, 2B hypnosis. She's a hypnotist. Before the break, we got into a little about what fear does, why it's not always a bad thing, and how people get stuck in it. And Sainoor, before the break, we were talking about how people get caught in this box of the stories they tell themselves about their fear, about their shame, about their embarrassment. And that box keeps them from, as I say, going good crazy. It's
I
bad
agree.
crazy instead of good crazy. And that's where you come in, right? With the hypnosis.
Thank you. And it does. And I think at the beginning, when we started, we were talking about fears and phobias.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just have a little clarification. So that fear is when you feel a little bit of, but when it's full blown meltdown,
Mm-hmm.
then I would call that phobia. I mean, the fear that has taken a master class in extravaganza, that would say on steroids. But I feel like it has started a full blown Shakespearean drama.
Yeah.
And that is a phobia when it just stops you from moving forward. You can't focus, you can't move, you can't sleep, you can't speak. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Fear is like you feel something in your stomach or you skip a heartbeat, but that's not phobia. And
Right.
so I would say that a fear in a diva fear is phobia. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. And it is an overwhelm state,
yeah,
right? And when you hit overwhelm, it's the four F's: freeze, fight, fawn, or flight. And we can't really control which of those comes out of us. We're all sort of wired to pick one or more of those four, and it happens faster than our conscious mind.
exactly. And sometimes we don't know why it's happening.
Yeah.
Like, for example, did you know that studies show 70% of people admit that they've stayed in jobs, relationships, or situations purely out of fear
Yep.
of what's on the other side?
Yep.
right? I mean, the fear of unknown is so great that we allow ourselves to be squished, as you were saying, in place. Like COVID. Think of COVID. People refused to leave their homes. They were
Yeah.
reporting their neighbors.
Yeah.
It was like we became a communist state. They were calling the police on their neighbors. And I
Yeah.
knew quite a few people who had police show up at their house.
Oh my
We were
goodness.
thinking, when did we become that paranoid?
Yeah, and there are even people now who haven't, hit the reset button post
Well,
lockdowns. Yeah.
I know someone who, even after COVID opened up and I went to do the National Women's Show in Ottawa, like I knew people who refused to still come. After 3 years, they
Yeah.
refused to come to any gathering. And I think of how much life you're missing, right?
That's exactly it.
And we talked about how fear is primal.
Hmm.
It's ancient. The funny part is that fear is like a virus. It adapts.
And it
It's
spreads from
adapted
person to
to
person.
today's world. We may not be running away from predators. However, we run away from social media. Think about it. How many people get upset by social media? They scroll down, and we all do this, make everything look lovely and pretty, and
Hmm.
everybody's having a wonderful life except me.
Right.
But
Right.
that doesn't make sense either. Yet we are so frightened of what people will think of us, right?
Yeah.
The social media judgment, and we talked about that, about how people get into, and that also follows public speaking. We
Hmm.
are so concerned about how people see us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
It's
we,
it's funny
uh-huh.
when I first started doing this radio show and podcast, I talked to other people and they like meticulously edit the podcast, take out every cough. But I come from radio, which is you do it and it's live and you don't get it back. So if you miss the cough button, you just have to go, excuse me. If you stumble, you have to start and repeat the phrase over again. Life goes on.
It does. And I don't think that you get a prize for being perfect, nor do you get punished for not being perfect.
Yeah.
It's no one's going to say, oh my God, Shane, or how could you not know this or whatever. And they're not going to come to you and say, Liana, how could you not have said this properly?
And
You
if
know,
they do, that is on them, not
exactly.
me,
It's their
right?
their mindset.
Yeah. And there's that quote, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. That's only part of the quote. Because it's if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And like you said, people get stuck in ruts. The technical term is called reinforcing spirals. So they're afraid of something,
Mhm.
they withdraw. They become more afraid of it. They withdraw further. They become more afraid of it, and then they withdraw further.
It's just like that thought, you attract what you put out.
Yes. Yeah.
So if
And
I'm afraid of bees, I'm going to see them at every step,
yep.
because that's what starts coming in front of us, because that's all your mind is geared for. It's like watching for bees, right?
Yep. Yep.
I think that we go back to the beginning where we talked about the elephant and about how fear is really good for us, right?
Hmm.
So fear isn't the villain of the story. People look at it as something bad. It isn't. It's more like that awkward friend that's always hanging around whispering worst case scenarios just in case in your ear. But we don't realize that it doesn't have to be a sports spot. It's really trying to be helpful.
Yep.
But sometimes it's overzealous. It's like if you have a bodyguard, they want you to wear a helmet when you sit down for dinner. That's what it is. So we have to temper with it, right?
Yeah. And it this is why, you said off the top, we're of like minds. Because I find, like you said, people try to, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. Well, it's not nothing. And if somebody's trying to get your attention by tapping you on the shoulder and you go, it's nothing, they're going to tap more and more and more until finally they're like shaking you to try to get your attention because, right, they're trying to be helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And the universe is trying to protect you.
Right,
Right? So,
right.
so if we go back to the elephant I mentioned at the beginning, Fear is, if that elephant in the room is your fear, then instead of trying to shove it in the corner, what if you started working with it? What if you
Right.
said, I see you, but I don't know why you're here? Because if you don't see it, you mentioned at the beginning, it gets bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Right? So why not say, thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me know that something is off.
mm-hmm.
So why don't we have a chat? Why don't we use this energy of the fear to flip it over? Right? So I see you. And I realize that the more I ignore you, the more you seem to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So let's chat and see how we can work together.
This is something I had to learn to do as an adult because I was actively discouraged from it as a kid. You
That's
know,
right.
it's always the good kid is the quiet kid. I was too quiet, so my mother put me in performance, but I ended up just faking it, faking it, faking it, right? And I got really good at public speaking, but became very apprehensive of doing it. So I was one of those people who wouldn't sleep the night before, go out, do a great job. But all I remembered was I didn't sleep the night before, not that I did a great job, right? The
And then
negative emotions were stronger than the positive outcomes.
absolutely. And then when people tell you how great you are, you feel like a fake inside because you
Or,
were
yeah,
so tense before giving the speech. And you think, my God, do you know how hard that worked to be there?
right. And you're thinking of every stumble, you're thinking of the line you missed. And I just found the more I did it, the less I had the ability to think about, oh, I messed that up. And I've had shows that I've done that didn't feel good to do. And then
Oh,
people said, oh, that was a really good show. I'm like, okay. And I stopped going, no, it wasn't, and explaining to them all the things I messed up and started saying, why do you think that?
what
Right.
a wonderful way to flip it around.
Yeah, I got out of my own head by walking around inside other people's, you
Well,
know?
it's we never see ourselves from other people's point of view.
No,
And when you did that, imagine how much you said, okay, elephant, you are there, but let me look at you from another point of view. So maybe I'm not seeing you correctly.
right,
What a lovely way to tackle it. So, Shano, what did you like about my speech?
right.
And then you start learning things about yourself that you never knew.
Yeah, and that makes it easier to know, okay, maybe I am good at this. So this other stuff I'm not so good at, if in doubt, err on the stuff I'm good at to get through the stuff I'm not.
Exactly. And now I know what I'm good at. Let me see if I can get better at what I'm not. So you're
Right.
not wasting time, right?
That's right. And one of the things I realized about fear is that I didn't have to feel it all of the time, which may sound nuts, but there was a good decade where looking back, I was scared all the time.
And that's
And
not good for your body and your
no,
health.
no, it's not. It causes a lot of very strange physical symptoms. And then when I started, like you said, working with it, of all right, what's a way to make this less terrifying?
Uh-huh.
Or is this telling me that I shouldn't do it? Or is this telling me that I need to do it differently?
Excellent. What a
Yeah,
lovely way to work with it.
yeah.
So you had asked me, what do I do when someone
Hmm.
is really
I'm
terrified?
guessing this. Yeah, like you're showing it right now. You're showing your process, right?
Exactly. So the first thing I would say is when you are really afraid, what did you notice about, because you are speaking from personal experience,
Hmm.
what's the first thing you noticed your body was doing?
Oh, shaking.
Okay, but did you also notice that it stopped breathing, that you hold your breath when you're frightened?
Yes.
And so what happens is when you hold your breath, you hold the energy and the blood flow.
Hmm.
Then your brain can't think and your body can't think. So the first thing I do with my clients is have them take 3 deep breaths.
Hmm.
And this is I taught my students before writing exams. It's just to take lovely deep breaths, bring them down to the base of your spine and hold them for a count of 3. And you release it very slowly. As soon as you do that, the energy flows and you don't feel so overwhelmed or stressed. And tears are not always a bad thing.
No,
Tears release that held energy that you haven't released.
yeah.
The second thing I would ask is, when you feel the fear, where do you feel it?
Yeah.
Part of your body, in your head, in your eyes, in your stomach, in your arm. Most of us feel it in our solar plexus because that's our seat of power. And then what I would say is, put one hand on your heart, one wherever you feel it. Take a deep breath and just send love and energy to that part. Say, thank you. I appreciate you letting me know that something is off. I will look at you in a moment once I'm calm.
So you're not being afraid of your fear anymore.
No, no. So what you're telling the fear is, I appreciate you. However, I will talk to you. Not even I'll deal with you. I will talk to you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start figuring out, when does this fear start showing up? Sometimes we've had it so long, we don't know what causes it. Like, you were frightened all the time. For you, it would be a little harder because you would have to figure out, what is it that makes me frightened all the time?
It turned out I was afraid of my own reactions.
See, but was it always the same fear showing up? Right?
It
Sometimes
was,
you have fears in layers, right?
yes, yeah. It was obviously something legitimate at the core of it, but I was afraid of reacting to things and being criticized for the reactions. And eventually I realized the problem's not me. The problem is the lousy people around me. And strangely, when I got new people surrounding me, I wasn't afraid all the time.
But also, when you're worried about your reactions, you no longer are you.
That's right.
And once you stop being you, it prevents the rest of your life from going forward.
Yeah.
No matter how successful you may be or seem, inside you will always have a space of emptiness. And that is why wearing bling and walking and being happy makes life a little more fulfilling.
Right. Doing
Right?
something more than existing.
Exactly, more than what people want you to do.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we are not here to our life journey is not about doing what people want us to do. We've chosen this life for a particular reason. If you're always worried about what people are thinking, when do you have time to think about what your life purpose is?
And a lot of young people I work with go, I don't know what my life purpose is. I just don't want to disappoint anybody.
Well, and I think that is where you end up disappointing everyone.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. So what you do is you're perspective taking and just giving people a different spin on the exact same set of facts.
Exactly. It's just showing them how their reactions are harming them more than helping them.
Right.
That
And that they can change.
health wise, not being able to sleep, not being able to focus. A lot of people put on weight because they're
Yeah.
trying to hide their emotions, right? So I would say, look at your fear. So we talked about fear of flying. So if I had a client that had a fear of flying, the first question I would ask is, how badly do they want that fear to go away?
Yep.
Do they ever fly anywhere? Do they take a plane? If they only want to see the country in an RV van, then do they really want to deal with this fear? If not, then make peace with it.
Right.
However, if that person has now met a life partner who loves to travel,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different story because they have a reason to get rid of the fear.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you look at your fear, you have to gauge, how badly do I want it to affect my life? If I had fear of heights, I don't know if I would care. I'm not going to go wash windows. I'm not someone that climbs mountains and looks out from the edge. So then I would make peace with it. But if I do want to go climb Mount Fuji, then I would have to deal with that one.
Okay, that took me in an entirely new thought path, Chandra. So hold on, one more break. We're going to come back with Sainoor Premji of 2P Hypnosis talking about making friends with fear in our final segment on It's Not Therapy, nottherapyshow.com, questions, comments, concerns. After this, final break on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back in Instant Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are in our final segment, still talking to Sainoor Premji of 2B Hypnosis. And Sainoor brought up a really interesting point that made me think about something very personal. So let's get right into that. The other thing about fear and making peace with it, for me at least, was recognizing how much it was a struggle for control.
Ah, yes.
You know, if you can say, I'm afraid, and everything stops in a way that's very powerful. You're not in control. The fear's in control, but at least something happened, right? It's the one thing that could make things stop. The process of relinquishing the need for control that I didn't even realize I was doing was a big part of it.
The sad part is all these people who are terrified. And as we talked about COVID intensifying all these fears. And then we were sitting at home and we had nothing else to do but watch TV and be terrified.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the best things that came from COVID is freedom, which is really unusual. But who knew I could do hypnosis online?
Yeah.
I mean, who knew? And all of a sudden, now I can work with people who are not just near where I live. I don't even have to pay for an office anymore. And so I think some people thrived.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't let fear take over. They noticed it, they acknowledged it. And I still went to work. I went out. I did all the shopping for the house because I have elderly parents.
Right.
It didn't matter because I think I just wasn't there. And maybe because I work with so many people with fear, I had a different way of looking at it. So I kept my distance. I washed my hands as soon as I got home. We, did all the cleansing, everything that was going on. I just didn't lock myself in the house. I went for walks, we kept our distance. We went for a walk every day. So the same people, we would say hello. And I think that a lot of us discovered who we were.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think some people spent a lot of time alone with themselves and didn't like what they saw.
and then, yeah. And instead of dealing with it and saying, I acknowledge you, they flipped it out.
They deflected and projected and found someone to blame. And there's a lot of people walking around. They don't want to feel their fear, so they turn it into anger at some scapegoat. And so now they're feeling two negative emotions instead of one. And I think something deep down inside them knows what they're doing.
Exactly. And those are the same people who were watching their neighbors and calling the police. I couldn't believe that people called the police on the neighbors. I heard about at least 3 people who had that happen to. And I thought, why? I mean, okay, so you may want to stay in the house, but let someone else live their own life.
I think that in terms of public health and things like this, mass information campaigns, people don't understand what the purpose of things like social distancing, like, the lockdowns were designed to do, right? They were designed to slow down transmission. It was never going to stop it. It was to stop the healthcare system from getting overwhelmed.
Exactly. And I think everybody was all of a sudden we were all thrown into this.
Yeah.
The ministry had to work overtime to try and get this sorted out.
Right.
Everyone wanted to protect us. But what ended up happening is the fear, people fear on each other, right?
Yeah. And people are still trying to hit rewind and say, oh, no, it was some big conspiracy, instead of just recognizing that nobody knew what it was. No one really knew what it did. And everyone just did their best.
Exactly. And I think everyone did the best they could with what they had.
That's right. Yep.
If they knew any better, they would have done it. Just because I know something today didn't mean I knew it then.
Right. Right. And it sounds like what you do with people who work with you is just that, letting it be okay. The past is the past. Let's just move forward is a cliche, but it's a cliche that's true sometimes.
Well,
right?
What with hypnosis, you go into the subconscious and you change how it looks at the world.
Right.
So it's a very simplistic way of saying that. So what happens is we go down. You allow me into your subconscious, we talk to the part of you that's holding on to the fear. And if it's a simple fear, we can shift it to something else.
Uh-huh.
And then a lot of times people will come out of hypnosis and say nothing happened because your subconscious only knows the here and now.
Right.
It doesn't know past, as you know, and it doesn't know future. So it doesn't remember what it used to be like.
That's
and
right.
sometimes my clients will say, you didn't help me. And then a month later, I'll get an email saying, I apologize because my friend asked me this. And I thought, oh, that's right. I no longer do this.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes the fear is sitting on something else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
It's
so
sitting
that's
on
what
shame. It's sitting on deep hurt. It's sitting on something you don't want to look at.
exactly. And something you may not even be aware of. It's not necessarily you don't want to look at it. It's just that it's pushed so far down.
Mm-hmm.
It has happened when you were so young, you may
Yeah.
not even know it, right?
Oh, pre-verbal trauma is a totally different thing that maybe we could get into some other time. Sainoor Premji of 2B Hypnosis. Sainoor, how can people get in touch with you if they want to ask a follow-up question or inquire about your services?
They can email me at freedom at 2B hypnosis. So it's the number two, the letter B, hypnosis, hypnosis.com.
So that was freedom
Yeah,
at 2B Hypnosis, like freedom, free as a bird, free,
exactly.
yeah,
Free from it all.
freedom at 2bhypnosis.com.
Right? Or they can go to 2bhypnosis.com, which is my website, and they can book a complimentary 30-minute conversation with me. And we
Oh,
can discuss what their needs are, and we can see if I'm the right fit for them, because not everybody is for everybody else.
right.
If we can work together, and then we would then make an appointment.
Sainoor, thanks so much for coming on and giving us a half hour of your time. I think this is a great example of what you do.
Thank you. And I am so excited and honored that you invited me. So I'll just say one more thing about fear. Okay. So the next time fear knocks on your door, let it in. But remember, deal with it as a visitor. Don't entertain it as a guest, a relative, or a neighbor. So when fear shows up and asks question, understand and say, thanks, but I got this. So this is where we go wrong. Not only do we invite it, we let it build a house.
Yeah, we let it put down roots. Sainoor, thanks so much. This was a real pleasure. All right, bailing out real fast. Questions, comments, concerns, nottherapyshow.com or Liana at nottherapyshow.com. What a great show. Sainoor, again, thanks so much. And to you out there facing your fears, remember, your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next time.